We are going to focus now on looking again at CSR reporting. The question is it time for Malaysian guidelines? And we have two very renowned speakers lined up for this. Dr. Geoffrey Williams, Professor Dr. Geoffrey Williams from the Academy of Responsible Management, and Ms. Pang Oi Cheng from Green Edge Consulting, Sdn. Could we get Ms. Pang on, not stage, but to the front, please? So we've got your PowerPoint, okay. I beg your pardon, ma'am? It's Green Edge Consulting. Consult. Okay, sorry. It's written here consulting. It's a Green Edge Consult, Sdn. So may we invite our first speaker, Professor Williams.
Okay, thanks a lot. I have a very short presentation, which we can start straight away, I believe. I want basically just to reflect a little bit, because I've been actively involved in CSR reporting now in Malaysia for 6 years. So I think now it's time for a little bit of a reflection on where we are and why we're here and where we're going. Okay. And I want to make some observations about what we want to see in CSR reporting, and then perhaps to address this question of whether we want to have some guidelines, local guidelines on reporting. Now, in terms of reporting on sustainability or corporate social responsibility, which I take to be the same, I don't consider them to be different, they are the same. 2006 is a key year, because in the budget of 2006, Kambadawi said that listed companies listed on First in Malaysia, were to report on their corporate social responsibility. Dr. Lloyd mentioned this earlier on, and I think also Michael mentioned it earlier on. And I remember that episode quite well, because just a few days earlier we had been asked by Nizam Ali at the Institute of Integrity in Malaysia if there's anything that the Prime Minister could say in his budget to move forward corporate social responsibility in Malaysia, what would it be? And I said he should make companies compulsory to report. And lo and behold, one single sentence appeared in the budget, and it was, listed companies will now report on their corporate social responsibility. And I think that this took First in Malaysia a little bit by surprise, because then the next day, I think you probably also there, every single sustainability person in Malaysia was summoned immediately down to First in Malaysia to say, this is how you will do it. And the chief executive, as he was then, was also a bit taken by surprise, because he didn't even know what corporate social responsibility was, let alone how it should be reported. So it was a big event, but one which was, I think, a little bit of a surprise. Prior to this, some companies had been reporting. Shell Malaysia, for example, has been reporting for a very long time. I think going back to 1996, 98, or something like that. The drive for the Malaysia report was primarily because Shell Global were requiring it, and they were doing that as part of the global reporting process for the Shell group. Nonetheless, those reports were relatively comprehensive. Another notable report prior to 2006 was the BAT Malaysia, British American Tobacco Malaysia report, which was, I think, one of the first reports in Malaysia to use GRI framework. There are no stories why BAT produced a sustainability report, and some of these were to do with the fact that it is a tobacco company, and I think they really wanted to establish that despite the controversies surrounding the product of what they were selling, nonetheless, the way in which they were managing various issues in the production of the product were addressing some of the key sustainability concerns. For example, workplace practices was very important to them, how they looked after their workforce. sustainability in the supply chain was something that they mentioned, that was mentioned this earlier on, but this is something that they had mentioned early on in their reports, especially to do with the treatment of the tobacco farmers and things like that. And so that was a notable report. Since 2006, we have seen a pickup in the number of CSR reports that are available, particularly standalone CSR reports. But I have to say that in my view, in the 6 years since that listing requirement was put in place, the momentum has been very slow, and it has been very disappointing. When you consider the number of companies that are listed on Bursa Malaysia, and then when you look at the number of CSR reports that are being, standalone CSR reports that are being produced, it is tiny relative to the number of listed companies. Of course, you're not obliged to produce a separate standalone report. You can report in your annual report or even on your website. There is no prescription as to how you should report. Nonetheless, it is clear that even with these listing requirements, by far the largest number of Malaysian listed companies are not reporting anything of any meaning when it comes to their corporate responsibility. Nonetheless, there are some fantastic reports, green energy. Leading in that, we have also been leading in that, and I'm glad that there are not just a number of very good reports, but also a number of very good reporting organizations now that can assist in creating these reports. Some that I like to point out are UMCCI Holdings, which was the first report in Malaysia, an A+ from the GRI, and MRCB, which was the first report in the world in the House of Malaysia. We've also got an A+ from the GRI. So those are some of the early ones that we did, but since then there have been very, very good reports driven by, not only I think by the GLCs, but now also by some of the non-GLC companies. The DG's report, I think, is available for people in the conference today. That's an excellent report. I like it very much indeed. I mentioned the GRI. What is the GRI? Well, the GRI is a global reporting initiative. The current set of guidelines are the G3 as a third generation. And those are the guidelines that we are mostly using and applying. There are sector supplements for that, depending on which industry you're in, but generally speaking, the GRI G3 are the international guidelines. They are now looking at the next generation, GRI G4, and we're all being asked for our observations and our contributions on how those G4 guidelines should emerge and what they should look like. My contribution is very short. We shouldn't have to. Let's stick with G3 because we still haven't got a sufficient number of companies that are up to the level of G3, and now we're moving to G4 without actually getting people up to the G3 level. So I think my view on that is, my contribution to that is, let's not have it. There is an allegation that they are more comprehensive. However, if I was cynical, I am critical. I would say that actually the move to the G4 guidelines simply is to make it more complicated, and that's going to allow the GRI to charge a higher fee for them. But I think that is part of the motivation for that. At the same time, there is a process of what is often called integrated reporting, and I have to say the GRI G4 is part of the process of integrated reporting. Now, integrated reporting is not just about adding a CSR section to your annual report. Some people have suggested that's all it is. You just integrate your corporate responsibility reporting with your annual reporting, integrating into the same document becomes an integrated report. It's not about that. Nor is it about taking your CSR report and putting financial data at the back. That's also not integrated reporting. What integrating reporting is about is looking at your CSR processes and then trying to determine what is the value added from your processes from a financial or economic or business perspective. So an obvious thing would be if you introduce an environmental program which reduced your energy use and at the same time reduced your greenhouse gas profile, your greenhouse gas emissions, can you associate that directly with an improvement in the operational performance or the financial performance of your company? In other words, what is the financial return or the business return of your sustainability programs. In other words,